Hello everyone, hope everybody is doing well today. As you know that Clark County, Las Vegas, the tourism market is going more back to normal. The question is, will we see 2019 levels anytime soon? Because there's a lot of fishy things that's still happening. Many places, private places, are still demanding the masks. Not to mention, a lot of things are still in trouble. Clark County reopens at 100% capacity in June 1st with no restrictions. As you can see here, here's the Hustler Club. I've only been on the rooftop deck, and that was early in the morning. The county commissioners allowed businesses to return 100% capacity starting June 1st. Now, I've told you about this before, that the regulators, the Gaming Control Board, they're threatening them with mask and vaccine mandates. A lot of people argue that that's just a way to trim down the competition. This is why I believe Nevada has really become a corporate fascist state. This move allows businesses, including restaurants and bars, to return to their pre-pandemic levels with no social distancing, no restrictions on large gathering. Although those who are not fully vaccinated are required to wear a mask. Well, the question is, how are you going to really enforce that? Are you going to have these vaccine passports? It's a pretty good chance that we will. New York has been implementing them. Nevada followed the CDC mask guidelines and removed the state mandates who are outside, in many cases indoors, that receive the vaccination. I haven't received it, and I'm not going to receive it at all. Only about 50% of Clark County residents 16 years and older are actually vaccinated. Now, why do you think that number is not so high? It certainly is because a lot of people are waking up. They're very suspicious about what's going on. Many casinos lifted the mask mandates for vaccinated customers and staff. Many received permission from the Gaming Control Board to raise their occupancy levels to 100%. It's kind of funny how the left is so about pro-vaccine, when many years ago they were the ones overwhelmingly complaining about GMO food, that they were complaining about the loss of liberties about 20 years ago because of the events of 9/11. What happened? It's really interesting to see how people have changed over time. I guess because it's promoted as science and health, they jump align with it as opposed to safety and security. Many casinos have already lifted their mask mandates. Whole Foods, they still require masks, but Target, Trader Joe's, they'll require them if they are not vaccinated. We'll see if, once again, how they're going to enforce this. Texas Station Convention Center offer drive-through vaccination. The Hustler Club is allowing vaccination. Oh my gosh, it's just so disgusting to see how so many corporations have really bought in line with this. Las Vegas will fully open to pre-pandemic levels June 1st. Once again, are we going to see traffic back to where it used to be? Because they're going to mandate the masks. Will people have enough money to go in and spend? Because that's a thing you have to also understand. Will people have disposable income? The fact is, if that our economy is truly great and we're having all this success in employment and in spending, well, I suggest we take out the PUAs, take out the rent moratoriums, the mortgage forbearance. That is what a true economic recovery is all about. You start raising interest rates so people can get some savings, they can build capital. But that's not what's really happening. Take a look at this. Do you think people really want to come to Vegas when you see incidents like this? Just watch a group of 5-6 you-know-what screaming F you white pieces of whatever at diners on the Strip. So this is what this whole mass media Black Lives Matter hysteria has created. 4 Metro cops flee. Our Strip has literally been infested by these animals. Really? I want to know, how did the Strip get so animalistic? Not just certain neighborhoods, but I mean a lot of these visitation that we've been getting. I want to know what really draws them in. It's supposed to be really an upscale destination to a large extent, but it's not so much anymore. Well, we'll have to see. Maybe, hopefully, their support runs out. We can see how it all turns out. But as more and more people are starting to realize that this vaccination, the mask guidance, when you're seeing people like Dr. Fauci being grilled, we're seeing all these truths coming out, the Arizona election audit, more fishy things revealing. It's not just these powerful groups and these figures that have been pushing the vaccines that are going to really see a lot of trouble and tension in the coming months. It's going to be a very turbulent and fired up summer. But a lot of these corporations were pushing with all this. Is there going to be more truths out there exposing the fact that if these mask mandates were useless, if the social distancing, the shutdowns was completely irrelevant, and not to mention the fact that we had a lot of corporations like MGM, WIN, many other non-governmental organizations, Culinary, pushing for all this crap. It's not just going to be Fauci, Gates, and all these politicians that are going to be held accountable. Many corporations are going to be held accountable as well. Their reputations are going to be destroyed. So if we see that, well, Jim Murren, who's part of the COVID task force, he's been heavily profiting from this pandemic, there's possibly a great opportunity to show that, well, there's a conflict of interest. He needs to be held accountable. MGM needs to be investigated. WIN needs to be investigated for demanding vaccination. And this is all going to be built up. Not to mention, Jim Murren has a lot of heat. He's the one that started charge for parking. He's the one that admitted we changed laws. He's the one that sold company stock before the Route 91 shooting and countersued the victims. He's the one that's truly in charge, not Sisolak. And how are we going to have an economic recovery when inflation is significantly a concern? Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe inflation is one of the top concerns and has been for our economy for the last several years and decades. Inflation, is it really necessary? Why do we have it? It erodes our purchasing power, but at the same time, I'm not a gold bug. I'm not forecasting hyperinflation or a dollar collapse. Yes, the dollar index has fallen. Yes, there are going to be some tough times, but I'm not forecasting gold going to several $1,000s an ounce. I'm not like these gold pumpers like Schiff, Maloney, Manarino out there, which I'll expose in a future video. But inflation is a concern, and it's going to bite up a lot of disposable income for a lot of people. People talk about how, especially this YouTube channel, Not Leaving Las Vegas, how the unemployment rate in the US is about 6%, and it's less than 10% in Vegas. Yeah, this is the employment situation you have to look at. Employment has not been really getting better for the last 50 or so years, especially for males. Even for women for more than 20 years. The labor force participation rate has not been looking good, and it's not at pre-pandemic levels. Now, a lot of people argue, well, because the employers are not paying good enough wages, if they raise their wages, things will return back to normal. But will it? Will we have confidence again? Who knows? If there's a lot of reports, a lot of people being killed by these vaccines, which I don't care if YouTube is going to strike me down for this video. Give me a break. I already have a BitChute channel. And if they do, then it further proves me right. But the point is that if we start to see people getting back to the labor force, are we going to go back to 2019 levels? Because remember, we didn't really truly recover, depending on how you look at it, from the last economic downturn. Now, speaking of the economy, certainly it's not looking good for Sisolak. Not just him handling the unemployment situation, but just look at a lot of the conflicts of interest. Now, the good news about this legislation session is that a lot of the dirty bills doesn't seem to be passed. However, they're sneaking a lot of these dirty bills, these anti-gun bills, and look at us pushing all this, MGM and WIN. This is what I'm telling you. These bills, a lot of them are not being brought in for the goodness of their heart. A lot of these people are being pushed and pumped by special interests. You know when there's a bill that a lot of large corporations are for it, that is a red flag. There's a lot of anti-gun lobby that are pumped by elites. Nevertheless, Canizaro, who also promoted a public option, you might as well argue that for healthcare, a lot of corporations are against that. So usually when a lot of billionaires are for something, that means you should be against it. If you want, you can definitely do what you can. They just had a hearing about this, like literally yesterday. That's when they introduced it, and they're going to have a hearing about this in a few days. So if you really want, please submit your opinion. And you can see here, a lot of these bills have high numbers of opposition, outpacing the ones that are in favorable. And speaking of favorability, the death penalty bill, which had lots of favorability, which I was neutral, by the way, did not pass. Sisolak was absolutely not a fan, which means that he is not looking very popular. So a lot of these social justice people are not a fan of Sisolak. A lot of these anti-corporate people who supported Bernie and Tulsi, they're not a fan of Sisolak because he's in bed with these corporations and powerful elites. So who really likes Sisolak? The question is, do you think he's going to really win? Well, we'll have to see if election fraud, if the audits continue, if Dominion is going to stay there for the next year or so. We have to really see. Because we know for a fact that Sisolak was pumped by the casinos, Murren, MGM, and the tool that they have a lot of ties to, which is the Culinary Union, which about a couple of weeks ago, they threatened to sue me because we're exposing their schemes, their lies, their deception, their poor track record. The same union that pumped Harry Reid. You might as well call Sisolak Harry Reid Jr. You can see that a Google search is Las Vegas back, bars and restaurants closing 50%. Democrats and Republicans in the state say it isn't necessarily a case for Governor Sisolak, who has a tough re-election. How he's handled the COVID-19 pandemic, it's just not looking really good. Well, what do you think of all this? Going to these other articles, you can see protesters are out there speaking that why didn't you support the death penalty bill? Look, they're trying to push AB 286, and the sponsor is like, well, it can reduce the chance of gun violence. It's kind of like the argument that's made about gated neighborhoods. Like, yeah, it'll reduce the chance of crime, but is there actual evidence that it's actually worked? Just because it looks like it's the case doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. Look at this. There were articles about people warning that he has a history of anti-Northern behavior. You can see declared war on library books, disrespecting the American flag. I remember that. He was a telemarketing lobbyist. You can take a look at the airport scandal. How can we have a true economic recovery where MarketWatch about several months ago this year reported that the most overvalued housing market, as you can guess, you can tell by the quality of these homes, the desert landscaping, is Las Vegas. Now, we certainly don't have the highest prices in the country, but we do, however, have the most overvalued housing market, because if you compare to wages, if you compare to how fast do they appreciate, you will see that they report that Vegas is overvalued, meaning that 25% of the metropolitan areas and around 10% of the US is overvalued. Las Vegas was the most overvalued, Dallas-Fort Worth, because a lot of people are moving there. A lot of people are leaving in states like California. Idaho has become a popular destination because of remote working. You can see that prices are starting to contract in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. What do you think this is all going to end? And it's not just the fact that you got the forbearance, you've got the lack of labor, you've got the lack of cheaply available construction materials, you have increasing demand, but also you've got increasing number of baby boomers that are going to be retiring. Here's the real sad part, because it all gets me to this, that There's a lot of signs that show with all of this mass unemployment that's going on, this could be a transition to universal basic income. Now, if that happens, and if universal basic income becomes something where you've got like 30%, 50% of the population use, especially technologies disrupting employment, could we see a transition in living and getting around? Transportation, I'll talk about that in a future video. Could we see that even housing is going to change? Because this will be a game changer in housing. And why pay like $350,000 or more for a new home in Vegas, especially when we've got a lot of land and permitting costs isn't so high? Not to mention we've got technologies like this. This is a company, SQ4D, which I have thoughts about investing, I have thoughts about using for my future projects, how they can build homes that are much, much cheaper. You can see here it reduces the cost by at least 30%, some say as more than 60%. You can see Boxable. I've talked about this before. Even the YouTube channel, Bull Boom Bear Bus, has talked about this. They have a factory here in Las Vegas. This is in front of the Las Vegas Convention Center. You can build a casita for $50,000. I've thought about getting one of those because I don't want to rent an apartment for like $1,000, for heaven's sakes. You can build a starter home for $150,000. Why do you need to pay all these outrageous costs? Could this finally burst the real estate bubble? It's only a matter of time, and even if mortgage rates don't go up significantly, we can argue that if these low mortgage rates are not going to entice enough buyers anymore, the mania is going to end and it might as well blow up itself. Now, this is a little bit off topic. This is a cinemas that opened about 2 years ago. It's in the northeast section of town in North Las Vegas. And by the way, I've talked about how the mayor is now running for governor, speaking out against cancel culture like this. So apparently Latinos, especially the so-called indigenous people, have opened undeserved family-oriented Latino-dominated communities. It's just ironic how you have so many people trying to sneak in across our border. It's out of chaos, and they come here to be undeserved so they can have their own separation, their own cultural realm or niche of their own. Yeah, all identity politics. You have a lot of politicians who are having events in the cinemas. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And by the way, not all these Latinos are actually descendants of Mayans. So where do you actually draw the line? Unbelievable. I'm sick of identity politics. Maybe I should counter them and open a European American themed cinemas. Now, of course, there is the Italian American Club, German American Club here in Las Vegas, but oh no, just European Americans, that's such a taboo. But anyway, we're starting to see all of this political correctness, all this cancel culture really start to hit a backfire. Sales of many companies that have been implementing this has tanked, and it's important to you for you to share my videos, share this channel, so we can have more and more people speak out. And keep in mind that we did have black slaves all over the world. There's blacks in Iraq, India, various parts of the world. Thank you guys so much. Please share this channel if you can. Let's remain optimistic. It's going to be a very turbulent time, but I do see some light in the end of the tunnel, not just globally, not just nationally, but even in Las Vegas.